So we're going to turn to racing now, because tonight on TG Cahir at 9:30 there's a brilliant two-part documentary coming your way. Jump Girls tracks the lives of some of the most successful jockeys and trainers at the top of Irish racing. It features the likes of Jessica Harrington, Katie Walsh, Lisa O'Neill and Rachel Blackmore. It also features professional jockey Katie O'Farrell, who we'll have in studio next with the director Luke Mcmanus. You can have a look at this clip.
There is only one major professional sport where women and men go head-to-head for the same prizes: horse racing. Women work at the heart of racing, but only a few get to the very top.
To be a professional jockey is tough enough. To be a professional female jockey is harder again.
It's risky and it's physically demanding. It's not for everybody.
Hearing your name being called out beside the words champion conditional, that was phenomenal.
I see no reason why she couldn't be champion jockey in Ireland sometime in the next 4 or 5 years.
When I started training, it was very much a man's world.
I've got to be fitter, I've got to be stronger, I've got to be better, just to be on par.
You're only as good as your last ride, really. 1 week can be really good and next week you can be sitting on your arse.
I love the big occasion. That's what my fairy tales, my daydreams are all about.
When you win something, it's a bit of a drug. You kind of want that again. Don't think you can ever have enough of it.
You don't have to be strong to win races, you just have to be a bloody good rider.
Tonight, 9:30 on TG Cahir, as you can see, and I'm delighted to say Luke Mcmanus and Katie O'Farrell, I should say, have joined us in studio. You're very welcome, folks. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, cheers for having us.
Congratulations, first of all, Luke. It's brilliant. And the first thing, myself and Maura Trask were speaking about this earlier on, like the title of the documentary is Jump Girls, but it's just a brilliant racing documentary, which I think is indicative of the racing industry at the moment. There is no female jockey or male jockey. It's a sport that represents parity unlike any other.
Yeah, the project began as a women in racing project because we did Jump Boys with Ruby Walsh and Barry Geraghty and Davy Russell about 6 years ago, and TG Cahir actually were really keen for us to do Jump Girls, and we were like, well, and then the timing never seemed quite right, and then it's sort of the moment came, and the kind of whole women's sport, the sort of amazing growth there's been with Kelly Harrington and Katie Taylor and the ladies football and Annalise Murphy, and it just seemed like the right time. But you go out to make a film about women in racing, but then you realise none of the women want you to make that film, you know, because they're like, well, it doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman. And at the start I was like, oh Jesus, this is actually really awkward. But then you sort of realise that's the beauty of racing. And that realisation almost came later, is that it is the sport where there's equality. And Katie Taylor and Serena Williams are amazing, but they don't take on Djokovic or Mayweather, you know, whereas Katie rides against Ruby Walsh and Davy Russell every week, you know.
Yeah.
So it is that thing of, it's the only major sport. So there are other sports where men and women compete on an equal basis, but horse racing has enough capturing a public imagination, it attracts those big crowds, so it is quite unique. So that's then excited me,
yeah,
you know, about the film.
So I think it's fair to say that next week we're going to see more of you in Jump Girls, Katie. Yep. And I think it's also fair to say that there's plenty of talk about injuries. Clearly, since the documentary, you picked up another bit of an injury. I saw your Instagram. That shiner a couple of weeks ago was insane.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Just a standard fall, I suppose, at home. I was schooling a horse that I know well. It was just a careless mistake on his part, and he fell and gave me a little kick for good measure.
Yeah.
I don't know a standard injury, it's just a massive shock.
This is nearly 4 weeks old, so you can imagine what it was like 4 weeks ago. It wasn't pretty.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I think we're going to get the image up on screen there in just a moment, but as I say, the theme of your story, really, I guess, we catch up, I think, just after you've missed 6 months of an injury. We go through a couple of weeks of the season, and then you get to Galway, where you pick up another injury. If you want to tell us a little bit about that period, coming back and then getting injured again, and what you had to go through.
Well, it was was very tough. I didn't think, there was a point where I thought, God, I'll never get going again. A very low point, and then it just started to turn around, and I had the double in Fairy House, and my summer started off well. So I think it was a tough one to take when I got to Galway then, and it was such an unusual sort of an injury. The way that it happened, I suppose I didn't think it was broken. Sure, how could I think? But just by a collision in a race that could happen. So I carried on, and that's when I was declared on low sun for the Saturday, and no matter what happened, I was going to ride him. So when I won on him, I thought, oh, well, it couldn't be broken. I couldn't do that if it was broken. So I just carried on, and when I found out that it was actually broken, it was the worst news I think I could have ever gotten, because I was finally in a place or at a stage where I had built up momentum and I was actually making tracks, and just like that, it just stops there, and you've got to just play the hand you've been dealt from there. And then essentially I knew no matter how long I was going to be out, I thought it would be sort of 6 weeks. It turned out to be 16 weeks. No matter how long you're out, you've kind of got to come back and start from ground zero and re-establish yourself and prove yourself again and again. And I don't think I had long enough come back from the first injury before this one had happened. So I was kind of like, oh, not again. I was like, I can't do it. I remember I was in the hospital with my sister, and I was very upset, and I just said, I can't do this again. Like, I can't go through what I've just been through again. And I remember she just kind of held me and said, you can. And I was like, I know. I know I can, and I know I will, but I just don't want to do this again. And sure, like, what can you do? It is what it is, and I had to get on with it and wait. That was the hardest thing, is I didn't know, no one had ever acquired an injury like that before, where it wasn't a fresh break, it was a break behind a break. And
what was it? Was the break kind of after? Like, how?
So basically, what happened was a stirrup iron went into the part of my leg where I have the plate. Okay. So it hit the plate, and the bone at the back snapped. So
the pressure from the plate.
So it's kind of an injury that would probably not have happened if I didn't have the first injury.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was unusual. I went back obviously to the same surgeon, and there was no surgery necessary, but he just kind of said it's a waiting game, really. And that's the hardest thing, is you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know how far down the road, you know, you're expected to wait to come back. So
that's the hardest thing, isn't it? When you don't have a timeline.
Yeah,
at least if you could
I think you can't get your head around it then.
Yeah.
Sure, me, I was like, yeah, in this amount of time I'll be back, and like that was creeping up, and I was still on crutches. I was like, okay, well, I might just have to move the bar there a little bit. But that happened over and over and over, and I was there was times where you think, is this ever going to end?
Yeah.
But it does. It always does. You always get there. It's just whether you can handle it or not.
What did you do to handle it, though? Like.
I don't know. I suppose my sister was home from Australia for 2 months, so it was good timing, I suppose. And we just I travelled maybe to every beach in the country, trying to, you know, speed up the process by standing in the sea or swimming in the sea or whatever. But I'm sure it did no harm, but it certainly didn't speed things up. I went away on holidays and, you know, just tried to keep busy, but it's hard to kind of focus on other things. It's hard to switch off. And I know everybody says, you know, oh, just go away, go on holidays and do this and get your mind off it. And it's difficult to do that when you're trying in a way to keep as in touch or involved as you can without driving yourself mad, I suppose.
And the fear as well that other people might be overtaking you when you're off being injured and recovering. That's at the end of the day, you're a competitor. That's what I'd be thinking of if I'm sidelined by anything, thinking, oh, look at your one now, he's getting this and she's getting that and I'm sitting here.
Yeah, that's very much so what it's like. And as well, you know, all of us conditionals, we're all, you know, sort of neck and neck trying to fight and to be the best one, to, you know, to be recognised. And I was kind of in a nice position, I suppose, early on in the season, and you'd be, you know, you're kind of looking at the championship, and there was a bunch of us there riding, you know, a few winners, and, you know, I wanted to be champion just as much as anyone else. So it was hard to kind of have to sit back and watch other people take off and do their thing, and that's just the way it goes. I mean, you have to roll with the punches.
Luke, I'm sure you got a brilliant insight into the ruthlessness of the sport. I mean, there's injuries like Katie, and then there's, I guess, the defeatist, or not the defeatist attitude, but the defeat that you could kind of hear in the voice of Rachel Blackmore after the entry Grand National last year.
When she's telling me to piss off and stop talking to her? Like,
well, not in so many words, but certainly the tone. As
she would never be so impolite. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing, like, winners get interviewed all the time. And as a filmmaker, I always think defeat is more interesting than victory. Because you've heard that narrative so many times, haven't you? You know, oh, it was brilliant. And then and that started with Jump Boys, with Davy Russell picking the wrong horse in Fairyhouse and him watching the race back, and you could see the inner turmoil. So I always think how you respond to adversity and is interesting in any story. But maybe in a racing story more than most, because everyone faces it.
Yeah.
You know, Ruby Walsh, AP McCoy, Davy Russell, they don't have the kind of cosseted existence of a Ronaldo or a Rory McIlroy. Do you know what I mean? They suffer pain and injury just like Katie does. So there's a sort of democracy and there's a sort of an essential quality to that experience among jockeys, regardless of how high up the food chain you are. So it does end up attracting you as a journalist or as a filmmaker. And also it's drama, it's high stakes, it's, you know, pain or injury, or even, God forbid, death is always there around the corner, you know, in racing. So it does make it very interesting as a filmmaker, certainly, yeah.
From your perspective, Katie, looking at that injury we were just speaking about, I think you rode for another 8 days after that injury happened.
9 days, yeah.
9 days. Like you can only kind of try and put into words here what that pain must have been like, where eventually you said to yourself, I'm actually going to have to deliberately go and put myself into a position where I need to get off the horse for a little while.
Yeah, I suppose there was part of me that was sort of fighting it as well, just the thoughts of it maybe being broken. I just didn't want to know, but it just, like I said, the circumstances were so unusual that I thought, no, that couldn't be. So I carried on, but it was very.
The pain. What was the pain like?
There were moments where I thought I'd have to get down, like I wouldn't be able to do what I was doing. There was just once or twice, and I'd say in those couple of moments there might have just been a shift in my leg where I was, you know, it really caught me maybe 3 or 4 times. And on I think I had my last ride in Sligo on the Thursday night. I said I'd take Friday off, you know, and ice it again plenty. And on Friday morning, of course, I was declared for 2 rides in Kilbeggan on the Saturday. And so I had a day to fix my broken leg. And I was up through the night trying to ice the pain away, and it was just I suppose the straw that broke the camel's back on the Wednesday evening. And or Thursday evening, when I woke up on Saturday morning, I had to ring my agent and tell him that I will not be able to ride today, and I probably shouldn't have rode the previous ride or 2 either, but I didn't know it was broken, and I suppose I had spoken to the doctor, and we assumed it was like a bone bruise, ligament, sort of inflamed ligament. So that's why I thought ice will do the job and we'll carry on. But there just came a point where I just couldn't walk anymore, so yeah. I had to call it a day. And that's when and as well I remember going into hospital thinking, look, I'll just go in because Turf Club will want to know what's wrong, and they'll say, did you get an x-ray? And if I say no, they're like, why? So I'll just go in to prove that it's not broken. Still in my own world. Yeah, still in my own world. So yeah,
kids,
went
don't try and ice a broken leg. It's not a good idea.
Don't do this at home, folks. But yeah, I mean, the guy who told me, the doctor, the nurse who was there on the day, you know, he brought me in around just to show me on the screen, and he just kind of thought I was like a regular old person, didn't really realise what this meant to me, and he was like, yeah, it's broken, yeah, come here. I was like, and he just told me like really nonchalantly, like it didn't mean, like sure 6 weeks you'll be around. And I was like, will I now?
Yeah. It's amazing, like it's obviously an occupational hazard, and as Maura Trass has said, there's other people who can jump up in the pecking order if you're away from the game for so long. So I do wonder if that sort of enhances your relationship with injuries like that you have to say to yourself, no, I'm going to be fine, that there's a bravado around that. Yeah,
there is a bit of that. I mean, it's a race in all sense. Like we're all kind of, even though we're friends, we're competing against each other, and to be jocked off something is one thing, you know, and you miss out, but to be out injured, out of sight, out of mind, and people just forget about you. You know, sometimes people are out injured for weeks before someone notices, and that's the reality. Like you just wouldn't be noticed because there's so many other people there to replace you. You're so replaceable at any moment. Even if it's not that you're injured, but you're not riding well, or you give something a bad ride, it's just, you're only as good as your last one, and it's very easy to be forgotten.
There's like obviously a helplessness to that, but there's also the boredom, and they're like two very bad emotions, I'd imagine, for a professional sports person to have going through their head at any one time, especially for the prolonged period that you did.
Yeah, I'm not really the kind of person to get bored. There'll always be something for me to do, or you know, I don't know, I'd just be good like that. I wouldn't get bored, but it is, I don't know, it's just difficult to try and not get wound up or upset by the thing that you can't control. You can control so many other things, but if you're injured, that's it. Like, you know, you've got to just let it heal. And I wouldn't be the best, I wouldn't be the most patient. Like, you can't rush nature. Like, it's going to heal when it's going to heal, but I would think that, oh, there must be something I can do to make this go a little quicker.
That is a big failing, just in the medical profession in general, in that, like, they tell you your leg's broken and off you go, and nobody then thinks, but what about the mental aspect of this? And I know Race in particular, and Ciara Losty has done a lot of work with jockeys, and you've probably seen this as well, Luke, that the mood can change so quickly depending on a good or a bad day, and that can create a lot of kind of deeper internal damage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they say you'd only write a book if you've no other choice than to write a book, and I think you'd only ever become a jockey if you've no other choice. As in, it has to be the thing you have to do. You know, it has to be 100% commitment. And then for that purpose, actually, Bryony Frost, I asked her what riding the Grand National was like, and she said it's fulfilling a purpose. And that sense of purpose is so important for our mental health. Do you know what I mean? To have something that you do.
Something that you work for.
And then, like, that's why unemployment is such a killer, you know, and that's why being injured is such a killer. But I think for Katie as well, the timing was particularly bad because you'd ridden that double at Fairyhouse, and people were starting to really notice and go, okay, there's Katie O'Farrell, she rode a double, she's riding winners at the Galway Festival, this girl can ride, this girl can be relied upon, you know, and that's sort of where you were at with your career when that next injury happened. So that's particularly bad, because we all know in our careers you need that bit of momentum, and success breeds success, and you had a very successful, high profile little run there, you know.
Yeah, well, it kind of just, Fairyhouse ended a season I wanted to forget about well, so that I could roll into the next one, and then to have a Galway Festival winner is a huge thing. And yeah, like you said, it was just momentum that I built up, and re-proven myself, I suppose, and just to be stopped in my tracks again, it was very, very frustrating, yeah.
How sweet is the feeling of actually getting back out there after a layoff like that?
It is, it's great. There's a lot of sort of, I don't know, maybe anxiety is the wrong word, but you're half thinking, depending on how long you've been out, like, am I going to be able to do that? Do I know how to do this anymore? Because it's a bit like riding a bike. Like, if it's something you do and it's something, you know, you're bred to do, then it'll just happen. But it can be, there's an element of, like, I just want to get a few rides under my belt and just, you know, not have that my first ride back, my first winner back, just get into it. Like, you just want to get back going. But that can take some time. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, it's brilliant stuff though. It's really, really interesting and a fantastic insight. It is Jump Girls. Part 1 is tonight on TG Cahir at 9:30, and then part 2, Katie's story, airs next week at 9:30. Katie and Luke, thanks a million for coming in, and congratulations on it. So Jump Girls, as I say, tracks the lives of some of the most successful jockeys and trainers at the top of Irish racing, featuring the likes of Jessica Harrington, Katie Walsh, Lisa O'Neill and Rachel Blackmore, as well as Katie here as well.